The newest Warbond, Freedom's Flame, has arrived in the Helldivers 2 universe, and with it, how could it be otherwise, a lot of controversy among players. While some are happy with what Arrowhead presents after a 2-month wait since Viper Commandos, others really don't seem to have anything positive to say about this fire-themed Warbond. But is it fair to dismiss this Warbond immediately as a dumpster fire? Let's look at the content first, and then I'll share my own thoughts on the Warbond and some of the context surrounding it. Freedom's Flame is obviously centered entirely around fire, and I think that in itself is great, because since the game's launch back in February, a lot of players have already had a complete fire-specific build at the top of their wishlists. Following the introduction of the incendiary Imper grenades from the Polar Patriots Warbond, this build, including the incendiary breaker and flamethrower support weapon, is pretty much complete with the content from Freedom's Flame. 2 new primary and 1 secondary weapon have been added. The Cookout is the incendiary version of the Punisher, a rounds reloaded shotgun that shoots incendiary pellets. The Torture is a primary slot flamethrower, more compact than the support version. And then the Crisper is the very smallest version of this as a secondary short range one. Here you can see a simple comparison where, from left to right, small to large, you can see that there's a logical build-up in a canister's capacity, with the support version being the largest. So how much damage they do, how their damage behaves, so to say, is derived from the shared mechanism of fire damage. And 3 guesses, that's exactly what Arrowhead changed just before the Warbond released, in the sense that fire no longer passes through armor, but bounces off of it. Now, in other words, chargers will catch fire but not die as you could previously manage to do with a flamethrower. Hive guards and, even worse in my opinion, the armored bile spewers are now also a lot harder to get rid of with fire. The catchphrase, "kill it with fire," I guess becomes less fitting. This immediately makes all these flamethrowers a lot less attractive, and in terms of appliance, this whole Warbond is more suitable for partying with Terminates than against bots anyways, where a flamethrower is a pretty nonsensical choice. But if Arrowhead is going for realistic as a criteria for how fire should behave in-game, then wouldn't it make sense for Super Earth to have developed flamethrowers that would burn so hot that Terminate armor would actually melt away, or straight out boil Terminate innards within seconds so that fire does go through armor? But I digress. For Terminates, these weapons can still function fine as a general crowd control weapon, albeit less effectively so against armor. So what should we think of these weapons? Should we be happy with them? What can we do with them? Where normally in a Warbond review I cover each weapon separately, now that makes little sense because the, in my opinion, most important aspect with these weapons is not their performance based on stats, but the flexibility they offer you in your loadout choice, because a flamethrower is now available in each weapon class. Sure, the balance change affects them, but I'll come back to that in a moment. Choosing a flamethrower before meant no autocannon or quasar. Now you can take a flamethrower primary and still get an autocannon or an EAT, a shotgun and a flamethrower, although the latter would not be my choice given the small canister's capacity. When I wield a flamethrower, I want at least some assurance I can kill a patrol or a group without having to reload. With the primary and support versions, you have enough capacity to get rid of larger groups and larger targets, but I did immediately notice it was harder to get rid of groups of hive guards and chargers alike. The Crisper simply lacks the capacity for that. I do have to point out that this is relative to the difficulty level you're playing on. The Crisper can be an excellent choice for lower level missions. But all in all, this Warbond makes it possible to just put together a loadout in which you want to include a flamethrower for whatever reason. The Cookout is my big winner of this Warbond though. We know about the burning effect, which is quite similar to the IE breaker, but the large amount of stagger is especially useful for keeping larger Terminates at bay. It's powerful enough to also cancel the spit attack of spewers, which is a very useful thing to have. Other than that, it feels. What makes me very happy this time around is the armor set passive. Finally, we now have sets that actually offer extra protection against fire, something that I missed from the very start And all the more so since the cutting edge Warbond, where the arc damage passive on armor synced with the weapons. Useful to know is that in addition to the fire resistant sets in the Warbond, a few have also been added over in the Superstore, so here you also have more choice in the end, although of course this is more about cosmetics. And speaking of customization, this time we also get new skins for our vehicles now in Safety Orange, which stands out really well in game. Now a while back there was solid criticism from players that everyone looked roughly the same and Pelican 1 looked boring, and now half a year later you can see that little by little we're being handed more options for customization. And despite me saying this, there will still be people who will say that it's still not enough. Well, think of it this way. Just be glad that Helldivers 2 doesn't have an actual pay-to-win system similar to the first Descendant, where you have to pay every time you want to paint a different type of armor a different color. The title Fire Safety Officer does finish it off thematically, and all of this together does reiterate that a new Warbond, according to Arrowhead's philosophy, is more about offering options across the board and customization than it is about really introducing entirely new groundbreaking weapons. So just to revisit how some of the players view this Warbond, in a sense some already labeled it as a bad Warbond. Now I think you can let go of the expectation that Warbonds are going to add a lot of spice to the game, because Arrowhead wants to avoid at all costs introducing a new meta based on new content. The content from the Warbond should blend into the already existing arsenal. Now spice will have to come from larger updates, new raids, new stratagems as the story develops, and so on. With Viper Commandos you could already see that the content of the Warbond was brought more as a thematic whole with better cohesion than earlier Warbonds in my opinion, using variation on existing weapons or what would fit within the theme. But as I said, however, you can see that a lot of players continue to expect that a Warbond should introduce something completely unique. And I believe for some, this can be led back to Arrowhead's announcement a while back that they wanted to take more time for updates and releasing Warbonds. So when you then do take your time with it, then because of that people also expect a flawless release. And not just in technical sense but also content wise. They want an enjoyable, fun experience. But when the devs then have their own idea about how a mechanism should work, despite players being satisfied with how it works now, when you state 2 days before release that fire is now more realistic to describe a nerf, then it does look a bit like self-sabotage. Now there are always those who have made it a sport to approach new content as negatively as possible, but even now Arrowhead seems to make things extra difficult for itself in this regard, because by adjusting the balancing of weapons and mechanics, including the IE Breaker, a weapon you know players are going to use within a fire build, plus it's a very popular weapon, 2 days before the Warbond releases, the persistent negative perception the community already has about the way Arrowhead nerfs weapons, and for a lot of people how the fun is then taken out of the game, is brought back to the forefront. Sure, we as a community said that nerfing weapons 2 weeks after release feels bad, but then to change that to 2 days before a release doesn't seem like the right adjustment. Thus, unfortunately, we do come back to how Arrowhead balances this game. The game is made a little harder for you by allowing ammo scarcity to start earlier. We go from 6 to 4 mags, reasoning that the weapon proved to be an overpowered reliable choice for a lot of players relative to other weapons. If it isn't broken, don't try and fix it. This always comes to mind for me in relation to Arrowhead feeling the need to balance something which people clearly enjoy using, but it's not breaking the game in any particular way, but then still adjustments are being made. When you play a lot of tournament missions and like to play with fire, this is your Warbond for the taking. If playing a pyromaniac Helldiver makes you happy, just go for it and do your thing. Also, if you find the occasional flamethrower useful to a lesser degree, this Warbond can offer you some more strategic choices when selecting a loadout. But mainly the weapons do hang on to the fire mechanism, which just received a downgrade, so draw your own conclusions from that. Now we can't forget the booster in this Warbond, and it has the nice addition of dropping a swag of incendiary grenades just before impact, but whether it really has much value over others. This effect is applied to all Hellpods, so not only those of Helldivers, but also those of support weapons coming down, etc. So the probability increases significantly that especially at the beginning of a mission there are more friendly fire incidents resulting in death by Hellpod, I guess. Now the most value from this AoE effect logically comes from high difficulty missions where you can land back in the middle of large groups and then the charges can clear an area all around. But that's where it basically ends, and this makes it for a pretty narrow application. And then you're not even talking about what is the best booster or the top 10 boosters, because there are still a lot more useful ones than this one. So this is what I think of this Warbond. Now I'd love to hear from you what you think of it, so let me know in a comment. Also, don't forget to like the video for support. If you're not subscribed yet, now would be a perfect time to do so, because aside from Helldivers 2, I'm gearing up to cover Star Wars Outlaws and Space Marine 2 right at launch. Hopefully discover them with you during some streams here on YouTube, so be sure to stay tuned for all of that. Are you looking for more Warbond reviews? Check out the previous one here. If you're somewhat tired of Helldivers 2, treason, but looking for more co-op third-person action, then check out this preview of Space Marine 2. Thanks for watching, and as always guys, have fun gaming, be nice to one another, and see you later.